Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, April 30th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 937 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we speak with journalist Maha Hussaini, the head of media and public engagement at Euromed Human Rights Monitor, about their new report documenting systematic sexual violence against Palestinians in Israeli detention since October 2023. Later on in the program, Jon will report on the resistance in Lebanon, where Hezbollah-built armed drones are taking a deadly toll on the invading Israeli military. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. In Gaza, Israel is killing and injuring Palestinians every day, nearly 7 months into the fraudulent ceasefire, while the health crisis is exacerbated by Israel's ongoing draconian blockade on essential items, including medicine, infrastructure materials, and fuel. As of Wednesday, Israel has killed at least 823 Palestinians and injured more than 2,300 in Gaza since the so-called ceasefire was declared in October 2025, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. On Wednesday, Israeli attacks killed 5 Palestinians and injured 7 across Gaza, including a paramedic, Ibrahim Sakr, who was killed, according to the health ministry. Reporter Saad Hezbollah captured footage of Sakr's colleagues collapsing in grief around his body. Israeli attacks on Tuesday killed 3 Palestinians, including a 9-year-old boy who was shot by an Israeli drone in eastern Khan Yunis. A relative speaking to reporters said that they don't have cooking gas to make food, so the child, Adel al-Najjar, was collecting cardboard scraps for his family to use as fuel. Dropsite News reports that Adel's younger brother had been killed under similar circumstances in the same area just a month ago. At least 226 children have been killed since the start of the fraudulent ceasefire. An Israeli airstrike killed 2 Palestinians in Gaza City in an attack on a vehicle. Reporter Wadia Abu al-Saud was asked by another journalist what happened in that attack. Abu al-Saud, whose hand was covered in blood, says that, quote, "The whole world is saying that we have a ceasefire. I want to tell the world this is the blood of a martyr. Every day we have martyrs. Every day we have casualties. Every day there are violations. The occupation continues to target civilians, but the difference is that cameras and screens have been shut off from Gaza today. During the days of the genocide, they said there was global solidarity with us. Now there is no coverage, and they strike us every day. The siege is still ongoing. The healthcare system is collapsing. The education system has stopped. Every pillar of dignified life in Gaza has remained destroyed."
بشو عليك دمي صح؟ ايش الدعوة؟ هذا دم الشهيد الآن علشان العالم كلهيته بيحكوا إنه إحنا بوقف إطلاق نار. بحب أبلغ العالم هذا دم الشهيد. كل يوم في عنا شهداء، كل يوم في عنا إصابات، كل يوم في عنا خروقات. الاحتلال ما زال مستمر باستهداف المدنيين، ولكن الفارق إنها أغلقت الكاميرات والشاشات عن قطاع غزة اليوم العالم بيقول لك في هدنة في غزة. زمان أيام حرب الإبادة كان يقول لك في تضامن معانا، كان في تضامن عالمي معنا. اليوم أغلقت الشاشات والكاميرات عنا وبصدونا كل يوم في عنا شهداء، كل يوم في عنا إصابات، كل يوم لسه الحصار مستمر. المنظومة الصحية متهالكة، المنظومة التعليمية متوقفة. كل أركان العيش الكريم في غزة، جميع مقومات العيش الكريم في غزة ما زالت مدمرة.
That was reporter Wadia Abu al-Saud. Israeli drones targeted and killed Imad Miqdad, a man who ran a solar-powered device charging point in Gaza City on April 25th. In addition to providing an essential service for his community, Miqdad was also the president of the Palestinian Billiards and Snooker Federation. On April 27th, the Israeli army killed a Palestinian teenager in northern Gaza. The Wafa news agency reported that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, 15 years old, was killed in the Beit Lahia area. 12 Palestinians were killed across Gaza on April 24th in a wave of airstrikes and tank shellings. Medical sources said that 3 people, 2 of them police officers, were killed in an Israeli strike in Gaza City, while 2 other police officers were killed in an attack in Beit Lahia. Another strike in Khan Yunis killed 7 others, including 4 police. This video was recorded by reporter Saeed Hezbollah in Gaza City. Gaza's Ministry of the Interior and National Security stated that the strikes were yet another deliberate attack on police officers in an intentional effort to further destabilize the society in the Gaza Strip. A 4-year-old girl, Naya Al-Tanani, was injured in the attack in Gaza City and died of her injuries shortly thereafter. Reporter Nahed Hajjaj captured video of Naya's mother and relatives holding her small body, wrapped in a shroud soaked in blood, at the hospital. On April 23rd, a child was shot in the neck by Israeli forces who fired from their army vehicles in Beit Lahia. Reporter Saeed Hezbollah filmed Zainab Batah in the hospital in critical condition. As Israel maintains a brutal blockade on the Gaza Strip, preventing basic materials from entering while hundreds of thousands of families remain inside dilapidated tent shelters, an increase of rodent infestations has been reported. UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees, reported this week that in areas that are overcrowded with displaced families, especially in Khan Yunis and in locations with large amounts of rubble in Gaza City and North Gaza, an ongoing shortage of rodenticides have increased the risk of transmission of rodent-borne diseases such as leptospirosis and plague. Additionally, rat bites have been increasingly documented in multiple health facilities over the past months, the agency noted. A spokesperson for the Gaza municipality told the publication Middle East Eye in mid-April that, quote, despite our efforts to address the rodent problem, such as partial sewage interventions and removing random garbage dumps, we cannot eliminate the problem under current conditions. The scale of the disaster far exceeds available capacities, he added. Meanwhile, skin diseases and viruses such as scabies and chickenpox have surged, UNRWA added, due to a lack of basic sanitation services, medications, and hygiene supplies. Health experts say that the ability to control the problem is constrained by a severe shortage of pesticides, anti-lice shampoos, medical treatments, and calamine lotion. Israel extended the administrative detention of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia this week, with Israeli authorities indicating that his detention is now, quote, indefinite. Administrative detention is an Israeli practice of imprisonment without charges or a trial. Dr. Abu Safia, a pediatrician, was abducted by the Israeli army in December 2024 after soldiers raided the medical facility that he directed, Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. The hospital was then destroyed. Dr. Abu Safia is being held by Israel under its so-called unlawful combatants law, which allows itself to detain Palestinians from Gaza for prolonged periods without trial. Physicians for Human Rights in Israel said that the court, quote, upheld the detention despite arguments that detaining a doctor while performing his medical duties constitutes unlawful detention. The doctor's family said that he had been denied access to his lawyer for more than 2 months and is currently in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 prison in the Naqab Desert. They said that his health is severely deteriorating due to the physical violence Israeli guards have routinely inflicted on him, as well as ongoing significant weight loss and systematic medical neglect. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed a 37-year-old father, Abdel Halim Ruhi Hamad, in the town of Silwad near Ramallah early Wednesday morning. The General Authority of Civil Affairs stated that Israeli forces withheld his body. Israeli soldiers raided the town and carried out searches of Palestinian homes and assaulted the residents, witnesses told Anadolu news agency. Soldiers also removed an injured person from inside the Rohi family home during the raid, which began around 1:30 a.m. The Israeli army said in a statement that during an operational activity by army forces in the village of Silwad, 2 individuals attacked 2 Israeli soldiers who were wounded and evacuated to a hospital. Hamad was the father of a 1.5-year-old child and the brother of Mohammed Hamad, who was killed by Israeli forces in 2021 and whose body is still being withheld, Wafa news agency reported. Also on Wednesday, Israeli forces shot and killed a child, 15-year-old Ibrahim Abdul Fattah al-Khayyat, in the southern city of Al-Khalil during a raid. The local Wafa news agency reported that a large convoy of army vehicles stormed the Al-Hawaz area and sealed off the main street, denying Palestinian civilians free movement and ordering store owners to close their shops before storming the premises of a charity. The soldiers fired barrages of live ammunition, tear gas, and concussion bombs at the residents, resulting in casualties and the murder of the child, who was shot in the abdomen. Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian child last week on April 23rd during a raid into the northern city of Nablus, alleging that the child had been throwing stones at an armored military vehicle. 15-year-old Yusuf Sameh Eshtaya was killed by soldiers who opened fire on him. Hundreds of mourners gathered for his funeral procession through the streets of his village of Tel, near Nablus. The day before Israeli forces murdered Yusuf, Israeli settlers shot and killed a young Palestinian man in the town of Der Dibwan, east of Ramallah. 25-year-old Auda Atef Awauda was shot in the back by settlers. On April 21st, Israeli settlers opened fire on a secondary school in the village of Al-Mughayr, killing 14-year-old Aus Hamdi Nassan and 32-year-old Jihad Marzouk Abu Naim. Witnesses who spoke to the New Arab said the settlers deliberately fired at the students with the intention of killing them. They added that Israeli forces provided cover for the settlers while beating back residents who were attempting to rescue their children. The New Arab reported that, quote, testimonies of the residents and the wounded taken at the specialized Arab hospital suggest that the attack was premeditated, with the settlers having attempted to divert attention away from the school ahead of the attack. Faraj Nassan, uncle of the slain student Aus Nassan, said the settlers attempted to storm the village in the morning from the southern side. After a confrontation with residents, the settlers withdrew to an area near the school. Eyewitness Kifah Nassan, who went to the school after hearing about settler activity nearby, said the Israelis fired directly at the school's windows, classrooms, and balconies. The army arrived shortly after and began dispersing the Palestinian residents and firing tear gas at them to keep them away from the school. Nassan suggested that the soldiers gave the settlers enough time to carry out the attack, arriving only after 15 or 20 minutes and pushing away the Palestinian residents. He described harrowing scenes of terrified students trying to escape, crawling out through balconies before residents were able to evacuate them. A paramedic said that he witnessed 3 settlers deliberately firing at children attempting to flee classrooms or even just stepping outside to see what was happening. According to the paramedic, the settlers parked their vehicles on a road west of the village known as Al-Kasarat, then climbed the hill overlooking the school, standing only about 50 meters away. He noted that one student was shot in the head and another who followed him was shot in the hand. That was from a report in the New Arab. The publication noted that the 14-year-old boy who was killed, Aus Hamdi Nassan, was the son of Hamdi Nassan, who was also killed by settlers in an attack in 2019. Hamdi had attempted to transport wounded people during a settler attack and successfully evacuated some, but was shot and killed while trying to rescue another. The United Nations Human Rights Office says that since the start of 2026, approximately 680 settler attacks have been recorded in over 200 Palestinian villages and towns, resulting in the full displacement of 9 Palestinian communities. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israel continues to kill and injure people while destroying entire villages in the south, in spite of a so-called ceasefire. Israeli attacks have killed more than 2,500 people and injured 8,000 since March 2nd, and have displaced more than 1.6 million from their homes. For more on the situation on the ground in Lebanon amid the political charade of a U.S.-brokered fraudulent ceasefire, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada. While Washington attempts to portray a 3-week extension of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire as a diplomatic breakthrough, the reality across South Lebanon reveals a war that has merely shifted its form. The State Department's stabilization rhetoric serves as a hollow veneer for an Israeli campaign of ethnic cleansing that is struggling to translate aerial destruction into territorial control. What we are witnessing is a calculated attempt by the occupation to offset its stalled ground offensive and its failure to establish dominance south of the Litani River. The human cost of this diplomatic theater is being written in blood through a series of documented massacres. In 𝐓𝐡𝐞, an Israeli airstrike recently wiped out 3 generations of an entire family. In Roqayah, located in the district of Sur, just west of Ghana, Israeli bombardment killed 6 people, including a child. The depravity of these attacks reached a new threshold in Zun, where a double-tap strike deliberately targeted rescue teams. After an initial Israeli airstrike, a second missile was launched as Lebanon's civil defense teams worked to extract the wounded, killing 3 paramedics and a civilian mid-extraction. These relentless attacks are the frantic outbursts of an occupying force unable to secure the front lines through conventional combat. This pattern of targeting reached a chilling peak with the killing of veteran Al-Akhbar journalist Amal Khaneen on April 22nd near 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Khaneen was traveling with colleague and photojournalist Zainab Faraj when their vehicle was deliberately targeted. After seeking shelter in a nearby building, a subsequent strike hit the area, trapping Khaneen under the rubble. Faraj was pulled out first, critically injured, but repeated Israeli attacks, including fire on Red Cross ambulances and the use of sound grenades, prevented rescuers from reaching Khaneen. She remained trapped for over 7 hours before clearance was finally granted, by which time she was found dead. Her killing, alongside Faraj's critical injury, marks a blatant attempt to silence those documenting the occupation's failures in South Lebanon. While Israel's bombardment has claimed over 2,500 lives in Lebanon since the escalation in March, the resistance has responded with surgical strikes. In the final week of April, Hezbollah utilized fiber-optic guided FPV drones to bypass aerial defenses, successfully targeting soldiers within occupation security zones. These operations have inflicted consistent casualties, including a strike in Taibe that killed an Israeli sergeant and wounded 6 others. Despite this aerial terror, the resistance has dismantled the myth of Israeli air superiority. Fighters recently brought down a multi-million-dollar Hermes 450 drone over Al-Qantara, following the interception of an Hermes 900 Starliner. The dismantling of these strategic assets, occurring alongside the destruction of countless Merkava tanks, confirms that on the ground, every attempt to stabilize occupation zones has been met with a wall of fire. While the Israeli military resorts to scorched earth demolitions of border towns to fabricate a buffer zone, these actions reveal a military that has exhausted its strategic options. The message from the South is clear: the era of easy incursions is over.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but we wanted to highlight how Israel ravaged Gaza City's Al-Zahra neighborhood by Amro Rashad Abu Aisha, writing from Gaza. He recounts his life in the Zahra neighborhood in southern Gaza City, which was made up of dozens of tall residential towers. Abu Aisha was forcibly evacuated from his apartment with his family in the early weeks of the genocide in October 2023. And these are excerpts from what he wrote about his displacement and the destruction of his community. Quote, life in al-Zahra was peaceful, uninterrupted by the Israeli genocidal machine until October 19th, when our neighbor Abu Ahmed knocked on our door and told us that the Israeli army was about to bomb 3 of al-Iskan towers. He advised us to unfasten our glass windows from their hinges and remove them entirely to prevent the glass from breaking during the bombardment, which might cause injuries. Around 10 minutes after we evacuated, a series of intense successive airstrikes, or fire belts, shocked the city. When the raid was over, I returned and saw the 3 towers leveled to the ground, as if an earthquake had struck them. I saw some of the grieving residents trying to collect their belongings or anything that could be useful. Others were looking at the rubble, weeping at their memories and the effort that had gone into buying the apartments, which were destroyed in minutes. I went back to our apartment, distressed and tired. I slept for 4 hours and woke up around 6 p.m. When I stood on the balcony, I saw a crowd of people heading toward our tower, panicked, some screaming and others holding bags. I left the apartment and walked downstairs at a fast pace, anxiously asking myself over and over, what now? I went to the crowd where I saw a man holding his phone and talking to an Israeli officer. The officer told him that the residents of the rest of al-Iskan towers should evacuate immediately. Unbelievable, preposterous. The people denied that and thought that the Israeli army just wanted to bomb 1 or 2 of the towers. It is impossible, the residents argued, to wipe out 21 tall towers in such a short time. We couldn't imagine that. How naive we were. But all that uncertainty vanished after the first air raid obliterated 1 tower. We were horrified. Even though our tower in al-Zafar wasn't under threat of being bombed, we evacuated, taking only the essentials like food, flour, and our personal bags. We also threw some mattresses and blankets from the window because we had no time to carry them down the stairs. We put them into our 2 cars and headed to the campus, which was about 200 meters from the towers. When we arrived, we found the campus crammed with people. When we started searching for a corner to put down our things, another airstrike hit, shattering all the windows around us. My family and I were not injured, but I remember a boy whose face was deeply cut by a piece of glass. With every airstrike, I felt as if my heart had been torn out of my chest and then put back in. I'm not sure what type of missiles the Israeli army used, but the explosions caused high-intensity waves of pressure and sound. Although 2.5 years have passed, I still have no words to describe what I saw. The geography of the neighborhood was upended, a destruction that I've never seen before. Ashes covered the whole area, and the piles of rubble were mixed together, blocking the streets. One couldn't recognize their own apartment, and even if they did, they couldn't even reach it because of the humongous piles of rubble. Residents would inspect the area and then leave in tears, not even trying to retrieve anything from the rubble. On that day, most of al-Zahra was obliterated. Almost all of its residents fled, including people whose apartments were still standing, like us, and relocated either to southern Gaza or back to Gaza City. My family and I went back to Gaza City, staying there and bearing the famine and the constant scenes of death. I have never tried to return to al-Zahra, but whenever I journey to southern Gaza, I can see it from al-Rashid Street, flattened and annihilated. Beginning at Nusayrat refugee camp, not a single building has been left standing or unscathed. The scale of destruction is inconceivable. Those are excerpts from How Israel Ravaged Gaza City's al-Zahra Neighborhood by Amro Rashad Abu Aisha, a student of English, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. The co-founders of the newly opened Phoenix Library in Gaza, who collected, repaired, and reshelved hundreds of books from underneath the rubble, held one of their first events. In collaboration with the General Union of Palestinian Writers and Authors, they hosted a reading seminar for the novel A Spark of Fire by the Palestinian author Mahmoud al-Bassiouni. The Phoenix Library says, quote, "We are striving to breathe life back into reading." And at the Gaza seashore, Ahmed al-Madhoun captured this video of a father teaching his eager young sons how to fish.
صادت ما شاء الله. الله حلوة يا سيدي. كم واحدة هدول؟ وينهم؟ يا عيني بدك تنزل تصيد كمان؟ يلا بسرعة. يلا روح. يلا اسحب. 3 ما شاء الله يا عيني ما شاء الله.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you so much for rounding up all that news. There's so much happening.
So much.
So little of it is in the mainstream news headlines at all.
Yeah.
So I know people have, I missed you last week. I know people have missed us, and we're eager to get the show back. It feels like a long time, but we had good excuses, right? You went somewhere. Where did you go?
I went to Ireland. I was invited by these incredible women at Mothers Against Genocide, which started, the co-founders of Mothers Against Genocide were part of this conference. I'm going to show their t-shirt that they gave. Oh, don't want to fall over. Mothers Against Genocide. There it is. My new friend, Margaret, literally took her shirt off her back and gave it to me. So now I'm an honorary member. And it was this incredible conference called 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 𝐿, which is, that's the best Irish pronunciation I can do. It's an annual conference put on by these fantastic, anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist, anti-genocide organizations, the Democracy Collaborative and Trademark Belfast. And I just had the most incredible time. It was an honor to be invited to speak at this conference. It was on this magical island off the northwest coast. And I just wanted to publicly thank everyone who was there, especially Alice, Margaret, Susan, Fanula, Claire, Lorraine, Meave, and Nuala of Mothers Against Genocide. Look them up. They're just an incredible organization. And it was an honor. And I also got to see Abu Bakr in person. We spent a lot of time together. It was surreal seeing him. It was just
he's a very good tour guide, and
he really
a good
is
person to
cook.
learn a lot about journalism from. So
exactly.
I'm so happy. It was your first time in Ireland, right?
I had been there for a few weeks when I was 16. So I don't know.
But it's
10 years ago,
first
right?
time feeling the solidarity. It's a pretty incredible country.
Just incredible.
The whole place is a magical island. I'm just going to say
it really is. It really
is. The people are extraordinary. I miss it. I can never wait to. I was very jealous of you.
I know.
Yeah.
I was jealous of me. I couldn't believe it was happening. It was so wonderful to be around these people who are working diligently to stop this machine of genocide from inside the EU. And, these women especially were so inspiring. And Abu Bakr cooked me a meal, which was one of the highlights, I think, of my entire life. So anyway, but you also
yes, I was out and about too. I went it's kind of Irish. I went to Boston. I felt a little bit like being in Dublin at times. And I spoke at MIT. I was invited by students at MIT, and they were just fantastic students. And we had a great event there and conversation about what's happening in Palestine, in the region, in Gaza. And then I went to Bowdoin College in Maine, which I'd been to before in 2013. I was invited by the head of the SJP, the Students for Justice in Palestine, in 2013, a certain Zohran Mamdani. But I was invited back this time, and I met many friends. One of our dear friends there in Maine, who I won't name names, but one of our regular viewers, listeners, said that she and her friends watch many programs on YouTube. They're very concerned about Palestine. They're out there demonstrating, doing activism, campaigning. But she said, EI is the only one that feels like family. And that meant so much to me, because truly we do feel like family, and we feel like the people who are here with us every week now for 937 days are part of a bigger community. Yeah. So it was wonderful to be there and to meet people and to hear about the work they're doing, and to feel the love. It was really great.
Yeah. It's good to be filled up with that kind of community and just spirit of resistance and resilience, and it's to break that feeling that I think we always have of like overwhelm.
I just wanted to say, I haven't been going out and speaking as much as I used to, because there's so much work that keeps us in the office, so to speak. But the past few weeks I've gone out more. I think I may have mentioned I went to Kalamazoo in Michigan a couple of weeks ago, and there too, meeting people who are doing divestment in Michigan successfully. The Michigan Divest campaign got the state of Michigan to divest from $10 million of Israel bonds, and that campaign is moving forward. They have other demands that they're working on, and so it does really provide so much inspiration, encouragement when you go out and see and hear and listen to people who are actually doing this work and being inspired to do this work because they see others around the country and around the world doing it. And that's really what it's all about. We have to keep encouraging each other to show up every day for Palestine, and particularly for our friends and colleagues in Gaza, and make sure they're not forgotten.
That's exactly it. Well, speaking of our colleagues in Gaza, you had a harrowing but incredibly important interview with someone that we've had on the live stream a couple times now, Maha Hussaini. So why don't we go to that interview about this just horrific report of the most depraved practices by the Israeli army and prison guards against Palestinians, and then we'll go to Jon and then we'll be back after that. So Ali, why don't you introduce the segment?
Well, I do introduce the segment when we talk to Maha, but the thing I'll say is that this is a topic, the sexual violence and sexual torture, that's a very difficult topic. But if it's difficult for us to talk about and hear about, just think about how much more difficult it is for the victims and survivors of these crimes who have told their stories. And I think we have to honor that and owe them at least to listen and to record for history and for the pursuit of justice what has happened to them. So I know this is difficult, and you'll hear me give a warning in a moment. It is distressing, so I just want to amplify that warning. But if you're willing to listen, I think we honor these victims by hearing their stories and using this information also to support our pursuit of justice.
Well said. All right, let's go to that interview.
I'm Ali Abu Ni'ma, and you're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. Before we begin, a clear warning to viewers. This discussion includes descriptions of sexual violence and torture that may be distressing. Today, we're going to discuss a report that is extremely difficult to read, but impossible to ignore. A new investigation by Euromed Human Rights Monitor titled "Another Genocide Behind Walls" documents systematic sexual violence against Palestinian detainees held in Israeli prisons and military detention centers since October 2023. Based on first-hand testimonies from released prisoners, corroborated with medical evidence, leaked videos, and other sources, the report concludes that these abuses are not isolated acts, but part of an organized system operating with institutional backing. Survivors describe rape, sexual torture, forced nudity, and what the report calls collective humiliation rituals designed to break people physically and psychologically. Men, women, and even children were subjected to these abuses by Israeli forces while cut off completely from lawyers, families, or any independent oversight. Among the most disturbing findings are multiple testimonies from detainees who say they were raped by Israeli soldiers, men and women, and dogs that appeared to be trained for that purpose, as well as cases where men suffered permanent injuries, including the loss of testicles due to torture. Women detainees recount repeated rape, sometimes filmed and used for blackmail. The report places these crimes in a broader legal and political context, arguing that they amount not only to war crimes and crimes against humanity, but constitute genocide. Crucially, the report details how Israel's legal, medical, and judicial institutions have enabled and protected these abuses, creating what Euromed describes as a system of total impunity. To discuss these findings, we're joined by Maha Hussaini, Head of Media and Public Engagement at Euromed Human Rights Monitor. Maha, welcome back to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Hi, Ali. Thank you very much.
Maha, it's been a couple of months since we had the honor to welcome you to the Electronic Intifada. How are you doing? How have you been in the meantime?
Yeah, it was, I guess, in December, 4 months ago. It was around 2 months after the ceasefire agreement, and honestly, nothing much has changed actually since then. It still feels like a genocide being perpetrated. We spoke of so many topics back then, of the yellow line, of the displacement, ongoing displacement, and ongoing attacks, and it's still ongoing until now. But on the ground, the yellow line is still advancing day after day. More people have been displaced over the past 4 months. More people have been killed. We're speaking about now around 4 Palestinians being killed each day since the ceasefire agreement. Around or more than 800 people we documented being killed by ongoing Israeli attacks. So I guess that we can fairly say that this situation is not actually enhancing, but getting worse day after day.
It's such a horrific situation and not getting the attention it should. And yet you and Euromed and your colleagues continue to do extraordinary work and necessary work. And we're going to talk about that now, this new report, on sexual violence, really a tough, difficult report to read. The report makes a very clear argument, Maha, that what is happening inside Israeli detention centers is not a series of isolated abuses, but a systematic policy. Can you explain what led to that conclusion and what patterns stood out most clearly across the testimonies you collected from survivors?
Yes, actually, that's right. But to be completely clear, since we started documenting cases of sexual violence, we did not have this hypothesis that these acts were actually systematic or part of the broader policy or part of the genocide, etc. We started collecting individual testimonies in the beginning since October 2023 from men and women who reported being sexually abused during Israeli detention, in Israeli places of detention, or in their homes when they get detained for several hours by Israeli forces or get held in displacement centers or their homes. But then over the following weeks and months, the number of testimonies was increasing rapidly, actually. We started hearing about similar practices from different released detainees, and we suddenly found ourselves dealing with hundreds, actually, of testimonies where released detainees said they were abused or subjected to sexual violence. But this is not actually the reason why we argued that these practices are systematic and still ongoing until now. We actually based this fact on several points. First of all, let's agree that all male detainees have faced at least one form of sexual violence under Israeli military orders. Why am I saying that? Because according to a protocol followed by Israeli forces during their ground invasion in any place across the Gaza Strip, any place they enter, they follow a united or a unified protocol. And the first thing Israeli officers and soldiers must do according to this protocol is separating men from women. Of course, this is the first thing they do. And then they get all males stripped down to their underwear. And this has been like ABC storming protocol for Israeli forces since their first ground invasion. All of the males who were confronted or met by Israeli forces were forced to take off their clothes and stay in their underwear. Of course, some of them were forced to strip completely. And this is also documented by Israeli forces themselves, actually, in several photos, several videos they posted themselves on social media bragging about this practice. And based on this is, of course, let's agree that this is the first act of sexual violence Palestinians were subjected to. And you can tell it's absolutely systematic because it's widespread and part of a protocol. Of course, it's not an isolated incident by one soldier or tens of soldiers. Two, because it's filmed in many cases where Israeli soldiers, as I said, bragged about it with no actions taken by their officers or the Israeli authorities. The second reason why we said that this practice was actually systematic is that the testimonies we documented from released detainees, especially those who were tortured or subjected to sexual violence, particularly in Sdeit Iman prison, which is where we documented most of the violations, actually. These testimonies confirm that the sexual assaults occurred within a well-equipped institutional and logistical setting. For example, detainees who we met spoke of small rooms with metal tables and metal sticks they were forced to sit on, fixed to the ground. There were chains hanging from the ceiling. There were surveillance cameras, and also, but more shockingly, also there were trained dogs, as you mentioned in the introduction, who were actually trained to rape humans. Some of the detainees said they were raped by dogs several times. So this setup appears intentionally and specifically actually designed to enable this kind of sexual violence, this kind of abuses. And you do not prepare such rooms or train dogs to rape humans unless you were given, of course, a permission from the present authorities or from the high-ranking, even military and political officials to do so. And this is actually something that is present in many testimonies that are in the report, where they said that they were recorded not only by soldiers or not only by surveillance cameras in the prisons, but also by cameras of the soldiers themselves on their phones, personal phones. And this is number actually 3, why we based this, or why we said that this was systematic. Soldiers deliberately recorded the assaults by photographing the victims while naked in several cases or during the attacks. And even if the soldiers did not use their personal phones to record these abuses, there are actually, as I said, surveillance cameras where the authorities of the detention facility itself and the prison officers, etc., they sure know and follow what's happening day by day and minute by minute there. And they actually allow it to happen, allow it to continue, and not also allow it, but maybe also encourage it through ignoring these violations and protecting the perpetrators in most of the cases. And this is the best scenario, actually. Protecting the perpetrators is the best scenario that we can imagine, because in other scenarios, there is actually encouragement or incitement for the soldiers to do so. The last, let's say, evidence or point that we also documented is that Israeli officers and Israeli prison authorities actually were bringing Israeli civilians to witness the torture. Many of the cases, or many of these cases of torture were documented in the presence of Israeli civilians who were brought to these prison facilities to witness them. For example, in one of the testimonies we documented, and I will be quoting one of the detainees in the report, he said that during my detention, which lasted approximately 52 days, I was tortured and abused. Israeli soldiers brought Israeli civilians to witness the abuse while we were naked and beaten. This occurred 5 times, once at 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, where we were blindfolded. One detainee who spoke Hebrew informed us that the soldiers were speaking to the civilians and claiming that we were captured combatants. It happened 4 more times at the Negev detention center, where successive groups of Israelis were brought into the tents to watch us being tortured. And this is actually a practice that you cannot do unless, of course, this is a policy, a present policy, something that is permitted by the high-rank authorities of also the president, but also the military officials, political officials as well. This is not just a hypothesis. As I said, this is well documented in several cases, and also is still happening. And anyone publicly can check and verify these claims we have in our report by checking randomly the personal accounts on social media of Israeli soldiers, where they usually brag about such acts. And they have also posted since the October 2023, there are dozens of photos, actually, we all saw them, of Palestinians detained by Israeli forces. There were dozens of Palestinians stripped to their underwear in several places across the Gaza Strip. So, this was not, or we can never say that this was an isolated incident.
Thank you, Maha. Many people will find it extremely difficult to comprehend the scale and nature of the sexual violence described in the report, including the accounts of rape, sometimes repeated gang rapes of individual prisoners, assaults with objects, and even, as you mentioned, the use of dogs. I honestly, this is a 68-page report. There were moments when I was reading it when I felt physically nauseous and had to put it down and come back to it. I can only imagine what it was like to research and write it, let alone the situation of the victims, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you mentioned that you had hundreds of testimonies. So just say a little bit more about how widespread these patterns were, and what do they tell us about the broader intent behind the violence? Was this violence just targeted at the individual victims, or can you see a broader intent in this systematic policy?
Yeah. Well, just to give you a background, we started the field documentation on the ground in Gaza since October 7th. Since the very first day of the genocide, we went to the field. We started documenting cases on the ground. So until now, we have collected at least 10,000 testimonies from victims and eyewitnesses who reported about several violations. But speaking of sexual violence particularly, we documented hundreds of cases from released detainees who said they were abused. Of course, the testimonies from released detainees gave us an image of the extent of torture that is perpetrated or practiced inside Israeli places of detention. We basically documented 40 forms of torture in general and 7 forms of sexual violence. The forms of sexual violence, of course, include rape, threats of rape, forced nudity, assaults on genitals, verbal and physical harassment, and also coerced exposure to rape, where Israeli soldiers, of course, force other detainees to witness the rape of their colleagues or their relatives sometimes. And also verified accounts we documented indicate that Israeli forces have also systematically used rape and other forms of sexual torture against Palestinians. Of course, I was talking about males, but there are also documented cases against Palestinian female detainees, inflicting, of course, several physical and psychological harms, and using their bodies in several cases we documented as tools of punishment and retaliation, maybe of blackmail as well, where we documented, for example, Israeli soldiers threatening women of rape if they did not cooperate with Israeli interrogators or officers and provided information, security information about their relatives or their male relatives in general. In other cases, of course, male detainees, Palestinians, were threatened with rape of their wives, of their sisters, their mothers, etc., or daughters sometimes also, if they did not cooperate with them or if they did not confess. On several confessions, they were actually, the Israeli officers were trying to get from these detainees. Why is it widespread? Because of the consistency of these testimonies we documented over the past 2 years or more than 2 years. Every released detainee spoke of at least one form of sexual violence they were subjected to, or they witnessed others being subjected to. For men, as I said, it was widespread. It was a protocol, as I said. So this is number one. For women, they were strip searched in several times in most of the cases. They were also strip searched in front of male, of course, soldiers. There is also one case of complete rape of a woman. Of course, the cases we documented of sexual violence, 90% of them were of male detainees, actually. But this does not reflect the reality on the ground. Because, in a conservative society, women actually feel less comfortable speaking about such violations and being open to the public or organizations or the media in particular to say that we were raped or we were sexually harassed. But we know as Palestinians, not just as workers at a human rights organization, but as Palestinians who live in the very same society that is being subjected to such violence, we hear stories from here and there, from neighbors, from people who were detained, etc. There is a kind of consistent story and consistent details even. And this is what actually gives you an idea that what's happening is not just something that's been practiced in one detention facilities. It is practiced in homes since the very beginning or since the very first minute of detention. When the soldiers confront the Palestinians inside their homes or residential buildings or displacement centers, since the very first minute, they actually start doing this or practicing this form of violence in the vehicles, also moving them or taking them from one place to another. They are they face usually sexual violence in several forms. Women, for example, said that once when they were escorted from one place to another, even either inside the detention facility or from their homes to the detention facility, they were actually touched by Israeli soldiers in several uncomfortable ways. They touched their breasts, etc. Some of them commented on their bodies, on male, of course, we're speaking about male and female officers who practiced these forms of violence. So we are not exaggerating at all when we say that almost all of the Palestinian detainees either witnessed or were subjected to some form of sexual violence. It just differs, and it's only a matter of whether the released detainee prefers to speak to the public about it or prefers to keep it to themselves.
Again, I can't really overstate how horrific some of these accounts are. I would say they're the most depraved things I've read, and I'm being careful about what I say. But you talk in the report about the practices. You just mentioned that you documented 40 different types of torture, which includes explicitly sexual torture and other forms of physical and mental torture. And these, of course, are done together. It's not one or the other. They're all done simultaneously. And they include forcing detainees to witness abuse, including rapes, stripping people naked in front of others, including children and men and women, targeting family relationships. I recall a testimony from a 70-year-old woman in the report talking about how she was insulted and slandered, and soldiers threatened to rape her daughters if she didn't cooperate with them. So the importance of that is to show that the definition of victims is very wide. It includes, of course, those who are directly subjected to these attacks, but also to their family members, other people in their community, people forced to witness these particular kinds of crimes. What can you tell us about the impact of victims, and particularly any kind of support that they are receiving right now? Many of them are in Gaza, which, as you said, is still undergoing a genocide. What type of supports is it possible for them to receive?
This is true. Actually, a significant number of rapes were committed in full view of other detainees and soldiers. We have even documented several cases in the report where released detainees said that they witnessed the rape of other detainees, and the soldiers or officers threatened them of doing the same to them if they did not cooperate, etc. So it was like a form of coercion for other detainees. This, of course, appeared to be deliberate, a deliberate tactic aimed at deepening, first of all, the social stigma in a conservative society, as we said, but also undermining group morale and turning the act of sexual violence into a form of collective humiliation for the entire Palestinian society, not just for the individuals who experienced this form of violence. So the collective humiliation rituals that were practiced by Israeli soldiers and Israeli prison authorities inside these places of detention is, and of course, as documented in dozens of cases, are not isolated acts, but part of the wider pattern of the degrading treatment aimed at breaking both the individual and also the social fabric of the detainees community. Because, you know, when you witness the rape of one of your relatives, one of your family members, etc., you're not the same after that, and you cannot actually recover from such a trauma. The acts of actually forcing these detainees to witness abuse, of stripping people in front of others, of targeting family relationships, this all functions as on several levels. It, of course, removes the sense of personal dignity, personal security, the feeling of this familial ties between families inside the Palestinian society. It also reinforces total control inside the detention facilities or detention places, but it also extends the harm beyond the individual to the wider group. This is not only aiming at physical or psychological pressure, but also social fragmentation, weakening solidarity and trust, and also the ability of detainees to psychologically withstand abuse collectively. And, you know, historically, the symbol of detainees, Palestinian prisoners and detainees, this is a symbol of freedom for Palestinians in general. This is a form of resistance or a symbol of resistance, which is guaranteed by international law. So Palestinians view the detainees and prisoners inside Israeli jails as heroes. So when you turn these heroes to such victims of sexual violence, when you humiliate them and subject them to such forms of violence, you break the image, you break the symbol of resistance, of resisting the occupation in general in the very society. So this is part of the, let's say, the war on the Palestinian understanding of the idea of resisting the occupation, of freeing themselves from the occupation, etc. And it comes side by side with all the other Israeli practices of keeping these Palestinians just preoccupied with the survival tasks. Now they keep them preoccupied with dealing with this social stigma. And the impact on victims is very severe, and it is long-lasting. Many, of course, of detainees we met describe symptoms consistent of with acute trauma, for example, consistent fear, persistent shame, because, you know, in many cases, Israeli soldiers, or prison authorities, when they release detainees, they tell them that what you were subjected to can actually reoccur, and we can find you anywhere, even if you were released. So they guarantee that the victim or the detainee, after they are released, they will still live with this form of fear, of this threat that anytime this would happen actually again. So they inflict a form of or a sense of helplessness and social fragmentation and social withdrawal also of these individuals and also these families who witness such forms. As for the support, as you said, Ali, I wouldn't actually speak now about the support of the society itself, the support of the society to these victims, because the society itself is a victim. And here it is important to speak about secondary victims, which are the family members and relatives of the victims who were subjected to direct abuses or who were directly subjected to such abuses. One of the cases we actually documented of a woman, she was married to I guess a man in his 40s. He was raped, but he did not tell her that he was actually sexually abused in Israeli detention after he was released. But she knew after several days that he was raped, and she could finally translate his actions, why he was very violent towards her, why he was isolating himself, he was withdrawing from the society in general, and why he's turning into a totally different man. She spoke of a trauma she is now facing, although she was not actually detained by or she did not experience what he experienced inside jail, but she is speaking now of what we call a vicarious trauma, where she is facing actually, where she finds herself living in a situation that is actually should be only for her husband, or should be only lived by her husband. But this is something that I think that the Israeli authorities aimed since the very beginning. They wanted their abuses to trespass the victims, the direct victims, to an entire society, to break an entire society of Palestinians. And this is also why we say that this is a form of genocide, not just kind of systematic practices. No, it's not. It's not only war crimes, it's not crimes against humanity, but it's also a form and a tool of genocide that Israel has been practicing since the October 7th.
Maha, you spoke already about the role of Israeli institutions, and that this widespread practice is supported and condoned by the system itself. We're talking about the legal system, the Israeli military chain of command, and of course the politicians themselves. But you also talk about the role of the Israeli medical profession and doctors. Talk about institutional role. Talk about the institutional role in this, particularly the role of the Israeli medical establishment.
True. Actually, the report addresses the role of Israeli medical systems in the militarization of healthcare inside Israeli prisons and places of detention. There is some medical, let's say, collaboration with and support to these violations. The Israeli medical system actually and medical professionals have shifted from providing care for these victims to enabling the legitimization and continuation of torture against these victims. Of course, this goes beyond the denial of life-saving treatment or the use of painful procedures without sufficient equipment or sufficient drugs, etc., or pain relief.
You actually, the report is very explicit about amputations being performed without anesthesia or painkillers. Amputations.
Exactly. Many testimonies we documented of males, particularly men, they said that after the torture, they were brought to the some medical facilities inside the detention, the places of detention, and they when they woke up, of course, after they were there, they fainted under torture. After they woke up, they found out that some of their genitals were amputated completely. And this is not just one case. We documented several cases. So this, you can tell that these practices are actually part of the broader detention, or part of the broader system of Israeli prison authorities or detention facilities. There were also cases where we documented medical professionals issuing fit for interrogation certificates for victims. There were also cases of concealing signs of torture in medical records, and also pressuring detainees in some cases to assist interrogators to provide military information, sensitive information, of course, or to confess to these interrogators in order, in return, to receive, of course, medical care.
And you also talk about how medical personnel are concealing their identities, so that they're hiding their complicity. Doctors are not signing reports with their names, but with code numbers and things like that, so that their role in these war crimes and crimes against humanity are more difficult to trace and hold them accountable for.
Exactly. The documentation practices actually include obscuring the identities of those responsible, including doctors, details, including officers, soldiers, which makes it harder to trace actions, to preserve evidence, and to ensure accountability, for example. And as these violations continue to expand, it's not just limited to the medical professionals, but the entire Israeli justice system has not actually operated as an effective accountability mechanism related, or when we speak about detainees being subjected to sexual violence. Instead, this system has actually historically, as we documented over the past years, functioned in a way that sustains impunity for abuses committed against Palestinians. And this has been placing the judiciary at the forefront of shielding the perpetrators, shielding violations, and keeping this cycle of violence going as they actually obscure evidence and impunity, and keep impunity, So this systematic failure is particularly evident within the detention and prison system, where judicial and medical professionals, judicial and oversight structures often act as procedural cover rather than genuine safeguards. They actually weaken independent monitoring and normalize abusive practices, also encourage such practices, and provide protection, literally provide protection for interrogators and detention facilities. And in incident like occurring in detention centers as Teiman, these are presented as a clear illustration of this pattern. Actually, the judicial system, judicial response has also gone beyond failing to ensure accountability. So it has, in some cases, of course, contributed to weakening evidence, limiting victims, limiting complaints, etc. So yes, taken together, these findings point to a broader institutional reluctance to ensure genuine accountability, reinforcing arguments related to admissibility standards, and strengthening the basis for International Criminal Court to investigate these crimes, to prosecute those responsible across all the chain of command in general.
Finally, Maha, we just have a couple of minutes left, but I want to ask you something that has been troubling me. The Euromed report is a landmark in terms of documenting Israel's systematic sexual violence, but it's not the first or only such report. Yet, despite the mountains of evidence about such crimes against Palestinians, sexual violence by Israelis has received very little attention, especially when you compare that to the huge amount of attention towards Israel's baseless and debunked claims of mass rapes on October 7th. And I'll note that in at least one testimony included in the Euromed report, we hear Israeli soldiers, the victim talks about the Israeli soldiers using the supposed mass rapes on October 7th, for which to this day there is no evidence. That's a statement I'm willing to make based on the Electronic Intifada's long-term investigations of these claims. But they use those claims as a pretext to rape a Palestinian victim. In other words, they justify their rape of this Palestinian as revenge for the supposed crimes on October 7th. What I want to ask you, though, is how do you explain the fact that Israel's claims have received far more international attention and condemnation than the very well documented evidence of systematic sexual violence and crimes against Palestinians, which includes multiple first-hand testimonies, multiple witness statements, and all of the corroborating evidence that's mentioned in the report? How do you explain that difference?
This is actually something that cannot be explained by what we call a lack of evidence, because documentation of sexual violence against Palestinians has been widespread and has been produced over many years by victims' testimonies, legal filings, reports from human rights organizations, and even UN bodies and special rapporteurs. What we are seeing instead is disparity in attention, not in available facts. One factor is the imbalance of or in political and medical power. Allegations made by Israeli authorities are often amplified in international media by the international community, major international and Western media particularly, and political actors, sometimes before even independent verification takes place. And we have seen this and witnessed this in October 2023. By contrast, the documentation relating to Palestinians typically faces higher thresholds of scrutiny, slower amplification, and it also, in many cases, faced a skepticism at first, or dismissal, even when these were supported by consistent testimonies and evidence. There is also a broader pattern in how Palestinian victims are perceived internationally. Sexual violence against Palestinians is frequently underreported or framed as secondary to other violations, despite its severity, of course. Survivors also sometimes face significant barriers to reporting, including stigma, fear of retaliation, for example, as we spoke, that Israeli soldiers and officers tell them that if you spoke, we will come back to you. There is also some lack of access to independent medical examinations. The Israeli limitations and obstructing of UN investigations inside the Palestinian territories in general. So there are limited pathways to justice for Palestinians, and these factors actually reduce visibility, even when abuses are widespread, as we said. At the same time, as you spoke, unverified or later disputed allegations made in high-profile contexts, such as those circulated after October 7th, received sustained global attention, political endorsement even, and institutional backing in several cases. So this level of visibility created actually a narrative momentum that was not matched by comparable attention to documented violations against Palestinian detainees, even when those violations were supported by detailed evidence. And this, of course, reflects a combination of political influence, media dynamics, and structural inequalities in whose suffering is centered and believed in the media and international communities.
Indeed, and it's something that is very frustrating, but it's incredibly important that Euromed, you and your colleagues are doing this documentation work, collecting these testimonies. Justice can seem far away, but it won't happen without this kind of documentation work. And the work that you're doing, you and your colleagues, Maha, brings justice closer and makes it possible for these victims and for the world to know what is really happening. Maha, we are so grateful to you for joining us today to talk about the new Euromed Human Rights Monitor investigation titled Another Genocide Behind Walls, which people can find at the Euromed website. Again, I warn people, it is extremely difficult reading, very, very painful to read. And Maha, you are, of course, the head of media and public engagement at Euromed Human Rights Monitor. And thank you again for joining us on the Electronic Intifada.
Thank you, Ali.
What can you even say? Thanks for doing that work, Ali.
Well, thanks to them. And you know, a couple of things I'll say, listening to that again, having spoken to Maha when we recorded it, and then listening again now with everyone. You know, the as difficult as it was to listen to Maha, the report is much worse. I just can't stress that enough, both as a warning to anyone. Really, don't read it if you can't stomach just depravity on a scale I can't imagine. But also the how widespread this is. And we have another report. You know, this is one report. It's very well documented. Another recent report was published by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 the Palestinian prisoners' rights group, again, with similar testimonies, and the consistency is striking. This is endemic and routine. And as Maha said, it's the protocol in Israel's detention camps and prisons. And the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report also covers prisoners from the West Bank. So the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report, the Euromed report, exclusively focuses on Palestinian detainees released from Gaza, who are from Gaza and released back to Gaza. But the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report shows that this violence is also being carried out. These sexual attacks, these horrific crimes, including rapes, are also being carried out against Palestinian prisoners from the West Bank. And Tamara and I have written an article summing up what's in the report, and also we will include Maha's interview as a video embedded in the report, and we will publish that on the Electronic Intifada either later today or tomorrow. So it will still be graphic, but it will be a more digestible version of this that we want people to know without sensationalizing this, but it's important for people to know.
Yeah. And it's, you know, also important to remember that this isn't just a new tactic that Israel has started practicing over the past 2.5 years, although it's become more endemic and systematic since the genocide began. But Israel has been using sexual violence and torture against Palestinians
since the beginning, since the
beginning.
Nakba.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been widely documented, but of course it's about whose testimonies, whose evidence, whose suffering gets a headline and whose doesn't.
Yeah, and there's nothing sensational about, they're doing this research according to well accepted methods, human rights methods of corroboration. There were cases, we were talking to Maha after we recorded the interview, and I said to Maha, there were specific cases I'd heard of during this genocide. And I asked Maha, I said, did you investigate those cases? And were they included in the report? And there was a specific case I had in mind. She said, yes, we did. But we weren't able to include it in the report because we weren't able to corroborate it. So, it's not enough that someone just comes forward and tells these horrific stories. There is a whole process of corroboration, of looking for patterns, of checking accounts against each other. Because the other thing that I don't know how much, I think it came out in the discussion, is that part of the Israeli crime is there are direct attacks on individuals, but also they force others to watch. Yeah. So they force other detainees to watch rapes. I'm talking about rapes. But then there's the other forms of sexual violence that include forced nudity, like forcing women to strip naked in front of groups of men and in front of children. Yeah. And forcing, they're also very clear that children, particularly boys, were subjected to sexual crimes and assaults of the whole range. So all of that is in the report. And the spectacle that the Israelis also engage in is that they bring settlers, including, though it's mentioned in the report, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the so-called national security minister, they will bring groups of settlers, lawmakers through the prisons and detention camps to watch and enjoy this spectacle. It is utterly sick. Depraved.
It's just sick. We need to invent a new vocabulary for these kinds of crimes.
And what I mean, just one other point I wanted to emphasize, that point that we came to at the end of the discussion, Nora, about the disparity in attention and coverage. People know, there are people who even got frustrated with me. They said, Ali, you're doing all this reporting on the Israeli mass rapes hoax and not as much on what is going on, what Palestinians are being subjected to. And, I've explained the reason why we did that debunking is because that atrocity propaganda about mass rapes on October 7th was used to justify the genocide, and we couldn't afford to allow that to go unchallenged. But on the other side, the documentation of the crimes against Palestinians is so thorough and takes time. And any credible organization, the UN could take the data from Euromed or from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 or other groups that have investigated this, and they would find it meets all of their standards, whereas Israel has been able to provide, to this day, no substantiation or corroboration of a single rape on October 7th, not one. And yet we still have Sheryl Sandberg and others going around talking about this.
Thank you for that again. And as you mentioned, you and Tamara will be publishing a report very shortly, and you'll embed the video with Maha and links to both the Euromed and the 𝐴damir report, which I think is still in Arabic only. I don't know.
The 𝐴damir report is in Arabic, but we do include some of the key findings in our article. So check the Electronic Intifada, I would say, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also, what you can do right now is go to electronicintifada.net and sign up for our email list, and then you will get it in your inbox in the morning, along with all of our other publications.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ali. All right, let's bring on Jon. Hey, Jon.
Hello.
Yeah. Just
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. It's mountains of depravity.
Yeah.
Gotta collect myself.
Yeah.
And this is what we know, Jon. This is
Yeah.
what we know, because there are lots of people who haven't been interviewed, who haven't spoken.
There's still thousands of people with no charges.
Missing.
Stuck.
And there's people who are missing, people who have disappeared and their family members don't know who they are, and thousands still in military detention camps in Israeli prisons.
Yeah. Well, try to collect yourself. I know there's a bunch.
That's great reporting. Maha's doing.
She's excellent.
Yeah, the whole team there are doing extraordinary work.
Extraordinary work, and under the most difficult circumstances. They have all of my respect.
Yeah, indeed. So, Jon, you're going to be looking at what's been happening in the last week in Lebanon, particularly as the situation with the war with Iran is still very unclear and vague, and so we're just kind of waiting to see what happens next.
I didn't think I could
one.
bring anything beyond what we have covered week in and week out. It's a bit of a
it's a wait and see situation. But give us a little summary of what you're going to be talking about in terms of Lebanon.
A lot of drone attacks. I have this audience well prepared for this. We've been covering it for the last month or so, but this past week, I think it kind of got out into the larger media, and Hezbollah's kept it up. So there's a lot of film to go to.
Yeah, Roqayah mentioned in her report during the news that there's an increased use of fiber optic drones by Hezbollah, and so I know you'll be talking a lot about that and what that actually means. And you talked a little bit about it in the report last week that you did.
Yeah, we know that they've been using them, but we saw them this week for the first time.
Yeah, amazing. All right, Ali, you want to
take it away, Jon?
All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 937 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Today is day 59 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon. It is also day 62 of the U.S. and Israel's war against Iran, which is currently in a bit of a blockade such as it is in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. president said yesterday that he's waiting for Iran to say they give up. So he's getting bad advice on that. Today, we are going to focus on Lebanon. Let's go to the maps as we always do. I'll just say I'm reporting this on the afternoon of Thursday, April the 30th. You're looking at the BBC map of the area south of the Litani River, which was what Israel said that they were going to conquer in this stage of the war. They have not done so, but Chief of Staff of the Israeli military, Eyal Zamir, said that there is no ceasefire in Lebanon. There's still 6 IDF divisions operating in Lebanon. And we're hearing from the Israeli soldiers a lot of the same things we heard from the final stage of the military operation in Gaza during Gideon's chariots, in that they military is saying they are not fighting Hezbollah, they are destroying homes and making it so that there's nowhere to return to, which is what they said they were doing in Beit Hanun and Rafah in Gaza. And to this day, those things have held. So that is their operational, that's their strategic objective, is to erase those villages along the border there. Just yesterday, there was a Haaretz article with the headline that there's no logic to this, quoting scared IDF officers, talking about troops facing deadly Hezbollah drones while demolishing southern Lebanon homes. Israeli soldiers describe risking their lives to guard civilian contractors demolishing buildings in Shia villages near the Israel border as they remain exposed to Hezbollah's explosive drones, considered a significant challenge for which there is no foreseeable future. Again, so they're not defeating any resistance force. They're not disarming any resistance force. They're carrying out a genocidal, ethnic cleansing rampage against civilians, which is basically, as we know, all the Israeli military is able to achieve. Let's take a look at the second map, because this is more realistically what the Israelis hope to achieve here in these villages in the south. This is what the Israelis call the anti-tank line. They want to push the villages. They want to push the border back to an anti-tank line that was originally 3 to 5 kilometers. Now they're talking about 10 kilometers, but they do not have military control in those areas between 3 and 10 kilometers. So this is aspirational as it is right now, but the anti-tank line was supposed to cover 55 villages and towns in South Lebanon. To further of that, Chief of Staff of the IDF, El Zamir, he was speaking to troops in South Lebanon when he said, on the combat, this was yesterday, on the combat front, there is no ceasefire. We continue to fight to remove direct and indirect threats from the northern settlements. Any threat, including crossing the yellow line north of the Litani, will be removed. And north of the Litani, two things, beyond the yellow line and beyond the and north of Litani will be removed. It is your mission, he said to the soldiers, and duty to operate with freedom of action and remove any threat. At this stage, we are not advancing beyond the yellow line, but we are going to continue to operate to remove threats freely in that area. An Israeli military officer told Haaretz yesterday that the only mission is to continue destruction. There is no other mission. The IDF believes this systematic destruction of Shia villages will prevent villagers from returning home. Another commander said that contrary to the IDF's claims that the soldiers are destroying terrorist infrastructure in these villages, the destruction goes well beyond that. Quote, it is not terrorist infrastructure. We are destroying everything. It goes well beyond that, an officer said about Israel's plans so far. If we look at the next map here, you can see this is more like more accurate of where Israeli vehicles have been, far off 10 kilometers. In some places, you can see it's only hundreds of meters. And each of those triangles, you can see a triangle on the far right on the coast of that map. And then you see one towards the central area and another one on the eastern edge. And then going up the Galilee Panhandle, you see 3 more triangles. Those are the Israeli bases that they established inside Lebanon during the ceasefire. It was from those bases that they began their operations. And you can see where those bases are and how far they moved. Not very far. They're unable to move on the ground, which is consistent with their previous ground war in 2024, where they were also repelled from advancing. And so when they are militarily defeated, they turn and destroy civilian homes, torture people in prisons, as we heard on the previous report. So that is the situation as it stands right now. Everything you're going to see in this report, as ever, it has been published in the previous week. Since you last saw me, because of operational security reasons, various other reasons, some of the videos are published with a lag, sometimes up to 2 weeks, and sometimes they're published literally within minutes. So we're seeing the military media department operating across a 100-kilometer front line and filing their reports within minutes of the operation. So we're seeing full command and control and resistance on a level that has the Israelis really scrambling right now. So let's take a look at some of the footage from the past week. This is a psychological operations video. You could classify this as. This is a Hezbollah video to the Israelis. It talks about the yellow line. It says, no security zone, whatever depth, will protect you once we decide to deploy these weapons, in essence, is what it says. Don't let your government fool you, or don't be mistaken, especially by your government. And we're watching here a video of buried launchers, various types of guided missiles, drones, and all of them have the capability of striking beyond even a 10-kilometer border well beyond. And that's something that Israel has learned in this battle. Their goal was to get up to the Litani River, thinking that they would that would shut down Hezbollah's rocket and drone capabilities. But pretty quickly into this stage of the war, like within a few days, the Israeli military realized that most of these attacks were coming from far north of the Litani River, and operating south of the Litani was not going to stop the fire in any way. And this is Hezbollah just reminding us that that is the case. Naim Qassem spoke this week, and he said the resistance reiterates 5 non-negotiable conditions about this war. Number 1, total cessation of aggression by land, air, and sea, withdrawal of Israeli troops from occupied territories, the release of prisoners, the return of all residents to their towns, and reconstruction. He said the resistance maintains it will liberate every inch of occupied land. Record this for history, he said. The Israeli enemy will not remain on a single inch of our occupied land, and our people will return to their lands, to the very inch of the southern border with occupied Palestine. And together, our people, just as we resisted together, we will rebuild together. So that's the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, speaking this week about the fight. We've also heard him say that this fight is existential, that they will fight to their last breath to liberate these lands in the south that Israel believes by destroying will remove people's, I don't know what they think. It'll remove people's desire to move back home. That's not the case. And I don't think these can hold up in Gaza or in Lebanon, but we won't make any predictions at this stage in the battle. The next one here, we see a traditional anti-tank operation. This is through a thermal camera. You can see the Merkava tank arriving. You can see the heat signature of its engine, which is in the front on a Merkava. And the reason it is on the front, incidentally, is because of exactly this video that we're watching right now, a Kornet anti-tank guided missile strike from up high on a hill, direct hit on the tank. We're seeing an explosion of the tank and it slowly coming to a stop. We're going to see in a minute here the targeted tank crewmen are going to stumble out of the back of the tank after this strike. The idea of putting the engine in the front was that you get an extra 2 tons or so of heavy steel and metal guarding. So that's why the engine is in the front, and we see the reason for it there. In this here, you see the soldiers. Here they come out now. One guy here being dragged. We're just seeing them as little dots on the thermal camera. But you can see that there's clearly injuries in this operation, although none reported. I'm going to show you a few of these videos this week. That there's clearly casualties that were not reported, which is not surprising, but it's always useful to see the examples of when they don't see. You see the soldiers there. Hezbollah put their little red circle around them over off to the side of that clearly disabled tank. This operation was on March 30th near Bint Jbeil. And these are their tank killer units, their anti-tank guided missile units that have heretofore have been the backbone of Hezbollah's operational disposition until the FPV drone era arrived, as it has. And they are able to hit from a further distance with the FPV drones, the first-person view drones, than they are with these anti-tank missiles. And so Israel's effort to make an anti-tank line is useless against the drones that we are going to see for most of this show. And that has been something that has been surprising because the anti-tank units have been such a consistent part of Hezbollah's operations. And the Israelis know that, and the Israelis have been essentially hiding from that through the operations in South Lebanon. And that's what the Israeli military was saying in that Haaretz article. They're not fighting. They're not looking for Hezbollah fighters to engage and battle. They're not looking to disarm them. They know they can't do that. They know they can't defeat it. So what they're doing is simply destroying civilian property as a response to Hezbollah's resistance. Let's take a look at number 6 now. There's going to be audio in this one. So this operation was on Sunday. You're seeing a medevac of wounded troops, and then the medevac area, the landing area, was targeted by multiple FPV, first-person view drones, right beside the medevac helicopter. This was in Taipei. One soldier was killed in a previous operation, 4 seriously wounded, and 2 others moderately wounded in an operation that we're going to see coming up next year. And then Hezbollah was able, this video came out through the Israeli media on Sunday, and within an hour or so, the Hezbollah video was published, again, showing total command and control, the ability to get the footage and show the footage, publish the footage, all within this small window of time. Shows the capability. You can see the drone there just misses. Nobody was injured by that drone strike, though you heard the �𝐿 𝐄𝐿 that are now pretty common, especially from the Iran war, when we hear Israelis reacting to incoming missiles. Let's take a look at the footage from the Hezbollah video here. So we're watching, again, quadcopter drone. You're going to recognize this from the previous month or so of reporting. You can see their blades on the side. You can see them traveling through South Lebanon, identifying a tank here that is stuck and has personnel standing around the tank. I've edited the end of this video. Maybe tomorrow I can throw up my X account that has the full view, but you can see there we've edited out the strike, that you can watch the full operation. It's the same frames. I just blurred the soldiers to meet YouTube's community guidelines. But you can see 6 soldiers there, 1 killed, 4 seriously wounded. You could also see that they didn't react at all to that incoming quadcopter. Tanks are, if the tank engine was on, even if the one behind it was on, you wouldn't hear it. But you can see here the video that we're watching. This is up towards the top of the Galilee Panhandle. So there's the medevac helicopter, and you're going to see the soldiers off to the right, and the drone falls out of the sky just before the strike. So it's not clear what the target was. Hezbollah has targeted medevacs. They don't adhere to the same medevac principle, I guess you could call it, that Gaza does. But we'll see here in this next clip after this one that it looks as though a soldier maybe shoots the drone just at the last minute. The helicopter takes off rapidly. These drones are very precise, and that is their asset, among other things. But here you can see from this footage, we're showing footage now of Israeli soldiers. And you can see they're soldiers. These are not paramedics. These are soldiers from Unit 669. It's a Special Operations Forces unit. And you can see the drone there get shot at. Possibly it was shot down. And yeah, just to say, these are not medics. These are not civilian paramedics. The 𝐄𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐿, which is Israel's state broadcaster, they kind of put it straightforward. They said the investigation from the Israeli Air Force reveals that following the incident, the Air Force sent to the original incident was the tank crew getting hit. So following that incident, the Air Force sent 2 Owl-type rescue helicopters carrying medical teams and fighters from Unit 669. Now, Unit 669, I've covered them a few times in relation to Gaza, but these are Special Operations Forces, and their RIT is combat search and rescue, but they are not paramedics. They're Special Operations soldiers who are sent on other missions as well. And those helicopters are not medical helicopters. Those are combat helicopters. So there are some criteria distinctions to be made in that. And they are made by the Israelis. So we'll go with the way they describe their own unit in this case. Let's look at number 8. Here we have FPV strike. First time they've shown us the build from the side there. You could see it. These builds are smart builds. I talked about them a couple of shows back. Smart, clean, cheap assembly, easy to assemble, resilient supply chain. this drone is going to hunt down this excavator that's actively demolishing houses right now and deliver it more precisely than any other ammunition that you could find directly into the cockpit of that excavator. And now we know from Israeli crews that they have soldiers around them protecting these guys excavating, and an excavator operator was killed this week. I'll get to that when we get up to that video. But the Israeli soldiers in Haaretz said that the part of this plan in South Lebanon is a polygon is marked out for each of the units of the area, showing the section that they are responsible for raising. At the end of every day, there's an assessment of what was accomplished, and every commander is required to report on how many homes he destroyed. Each unit is assigned a number of bulldozers operated and excavators operated by civilian contractors that the military is required to protect. So that is what we're seeing in South Lebanon, straight up from the nuts and bolts of the Israeli operation. And you can see the buildings in South Lebanon in all of these videos. I mean, you're getting an aerial view of South Lebanon. You can see the terrain, how difficult it is to fight in, how much of an advantage the local guerrillas have over the the Israeli military that doesn't operate in these hills. And so you can see that direct hit right there on the excavator. Let's go to the next one, because then I pulled the build there, so you can see the build. You can see what is, I think, the fiber optic cable up at the top. You can see the fiber optic cable wrapped around it. The spooling is kind of odd on this one, but this is what is brilliant about these builds, is that they're all built by component parts, and depending on the payload, depending on the distance, they can alter the battery array, which is the blue that you see there. They can add more or less fiber optic cable, which is essentially a fishing line that connects to the command controller, which gives instant feedback, low latency, and it's extremely accurate. So, and it's also resists all of the Israeli tools that are supposed to block these. Electronic warfare, their active protection systems, you'll see in upcoming videos, are unable to stop them. But there you can see the basic build, and you see the RPG warhead that's hanging underneath there. So you're delivering precisely a pretty devastating warhead onto whatever part of the vehicle or target that you want. And that is what makes these so difficult for the Israelis to stop, and has really tilted the battlefield in Lebanon. Let's take a look at number 10. This, you can see another build here that's the opposite of that one. Going up, you can see the quadcopter. That's what it looks like from the ground. That's also the first time they've shown us the takeoff of that. So they're giving us lots of information in these. Right now it's flashing low battery. So they're obviously able to have just enough, because you don't want to have extra batteries. You don't want to be carrying extra weight. And so they have these dialed in. You'll watch a bunch of these videos this week. The battery's running out as it's coming in. So we watched it there fly over the target. Didn't just dive down on the target. It's flying back over it at a controlled speed, very slow, too slow for the active protection system radars, although these are going to hit a Jeep that doesn't carry those. These are Land Rover Jeeps that are usually used by special operations forces. Hezbollah identified it as a command vehicle. Both seem accurate descriptions of that particular targeting. But the fiber optics also allow them to get down onto the ground level. You'll watch here, he almost skips through the grass. The radio signal wouldn't work as well in the hills. And so there you see the Jeep direct hit on that. On Sunday, Hezbollah released a statement that said, Hezbollah clearly and decisively confirms that the enemy's continued violation of the ceasefire, its continued attacks again, including shelling, bulldozing, and destruction of homes or targeting of civilians, and before all that, its continued occupation of Lebanese lands and violations of its sovereignty will be met with response and resistance resistance present and ready to defend its land and its people, a right guaranteed by international charters. We will not wait for or bet on failed diplomacy that has proven its futility, nor on the authorities negligent in protecting their homeland. For the people of this land are the true guarantors of the true guarantee is in confronting the aggression and repelling the occupation. Let's take a look at number 11. This is in Vintage Bale, again against destructive D9 bulldozers that are destroying homes. Again, you can see some of this on-screen signals that they get. And there you see the target, a D9 Caterpillar bulldozer on the BDS list. Caterpillar is going to get hit again right in the cockpit. And the IDF is scrambling about these quadcopters because they don't have any defense for them. The Army radio said that the improvements to soldiers' weapons is one of the ideas to increase the ability to hit the drones. There are special intentions and also fragmentation ammunition that can be fired at the drone to increase the chances of hitting it. So shotguns, basically, is what they're saying. It was decided to reduce helicopter landing times inside Lebanese territory so that the time the helicopter is on the ground during the casualty evacuation is minimized to reduce the possibility of Hezbollah locating the helicopter and trying to hit it. Again, Hezbollah intelligence will make that useless. They want to deploy various types of radars extensively within Lebanese territory. Again, radars aren't going to work unless you want your radar to pick up every single bird that's flying, and then you're going to pop off your weaponry at the bird that your radar caught. There's really no solution. We saw it actually yesterday. I didn't bring it on, but probably a lot of you who are watching this saw this. The Israelis testing, it looked like testing one of their Hummers with Ukrainian style netting all over the Jeep. And that's really the only solution that they have found in Ukraine is massive fishing nets, to put massive fishing nets above their positions. So we'll see where Israel goes with this, but this has been a remarkable advance battlefield adaptation, tactical adaptation that we're literally seeing hour by hour, if not a day by day, if not hour by hour. So let's take a look at the next one, number 12. I think we're on now. Is that right? This is in Kantara, again, near Vintage Bale. And we're seeing the beautiful hills of South Lebanon. A lot of these videos are remarkable for what you see in this area. And this one is no exception to that. This is against a moving vehicle. And the Israelis have complained that the threat is more significant when they're out in the open, which matches the battlefield in Ukraine. That the open areas and commuting vehicles like this one here, the Humvee that's going to come up, drone is going to come up behind it and put it into, or attempt to put it into the back door of this Humvee. We don't see the final detonation, but again, it's carrying an anti-tank warhead, 93 millimeter anti-tank warhead that has the ability to penetrate as much as 500 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. And that is not what is on those Humvees. So to deliver these weapons, and that's also why the net won't work. You put a net over this vehicle that we're watching right here, the RPG round just gets caught in the net and then detonates over top of the troops. So not super useful. Let's go to 13. This is against another beautiful shot of South Lebanon in the spring and showing the roads that the Israelis have to travel along to get through these valleys. And that is their willingness to go through these valleys simply to destroy homes and take casualties every day. Another soldier was killed today. 13 more were wounded today in FPV drone strikes. Again, FPV stands for first person view, which is what we're seeing here. The pilot is looking at the same thing that we're looking at. Again, low battery, which is optimizing the build, the drone build to have one less battery, gives you more distance, more range. That's an Aton 8-wheeled troop carrier that got hit there directly on the top. These Atons we saw them a little bit in Gaza, but these are new vehicles since the 2023 war began. Again, this is all the same war that started on October 7th. We cover it that way, and all the players see it that way as well. So again, low battery, you optimizing right up to the point of a direct hit. If you have too much weight, you slow down, you shorten your range, and your effectiveness. Again, a strike on the top of that Aton in Bint Jbeil. 14, we're going to see another one here aiming directly at the active protection system, right directly on it. This hit is going to show you. So you see in the comments a lot, and we deal with it a lot in this corner of work, that every Israeli believes that every single round ever fired is intercepted by their blessed trophy active protection system, which you can see right there. That's literally what they're hitting. That's the reloader. To the left is the launcher. If it launched, you would see something less than a shotgun blast, but many small EFPs, explosively formed penetrators, are fired out at the incoming target. This target is too slow, has too low a signature, has almost no signature, although the warhead it's carrying has a signature. But you can see it did not deploy on that as well. The system failed. The speed of the drone, the calibration to deal with a Coronet anti-tank missile on one hand that's going 25 or 30 times as fast as the drone, makes it impossible to calibrate, because you'd be firing off at birds would be the primary one. If you were to lower your calibration enough to encapsulate these quadcopters, it would be sent off for every bird. So there you can see straight ahead above the crosshairs right there on the left, that's the launcher of the APS. The next video is against another excavator. These have been consistently targeted. You can see the destruction in this is in Bint Jbeil, systematic destruction with bulldozers, but also with carrying explosives like we saw in Gaza to carry out the demolitions. And this is, again, an active excavator. You can see it moving. An excavator that not in this was from April 14th, this operation, again, directly into the cockpit of a manned excavator actively demolishing homes. This killed not this, but another excavator strike killed one of the civilian contractors, military contractors, and his son was seriously wounded by shrapnel. And interestingly, from Armory Radio, according to procedures introduced in the IDF during the war, all employees of contractor companies sign a document before entering Lebanon acknowledging that they will not be recognized as fallen IDF soldiers. So their families don't get compensation for them getting killed. They signed a waiver, and that's how Israel treats its. I mean, there's nothing civilian about that operation. It's clearly a military operation. It's a paramilitary operation at the very least, but they don't want to give them. They don't want to give the civilian contractors the benefits that are given to soldiers' families. So that's kind of another dark element of the overall genocidal project that Israel is rampaging through the region with. Let's take a look at number 16 now. This is in Mesa Jabal. And you can see the build here. Again, you're seeing at the back there, applying the detonator where the rocket motor would be. And there you see the drone I'll show you after this. I have a still of this one, but you can see this is an fiber optic. It's running on fiber optics. And fiber optics just mean that when the controller presses forward, down, sideways, any move, it's instant. And that just makes flying these, that's part of what makes them such a deadly tool. Here they're hitting the front of the Merkava. Here you're seeing it dive down and hit the front of it, which normally you wouldn't say would be the best target. They're built with especially the under carriage is really heavily fortified for ground-based bombs, roadside bombs. But we see this one when the second tank is hit. You can see that there's 2 strikes on the same tank, and you can see that there is some sort of transmission fluid or some sort of fuel that has spilled out. It's clearly disabled the tank, which is why they have a second shot at it here. So we're seeing these kind of tactical adaptations. Now they're sending 2 drones. That's what they did in that medevac strike, was 2 drones. It was 2 drones against that tank where the soldiers were. And there's 2 strikes against this same tank here in Maisel Jabal. Direct strikes on both because of the precision of the weapon. So this is the fiber optics. This is the first time they showed us this. We've seen it before. We saw it on crashed drones. But this is the first time they've shown us the actual, the obvious spool. I think that previous one was a spool. They had it on top and it was square. But this is the more conventional way to do it. And essentially that bottom part that you see there with the nose spits out like a fishing rod, spits out essentially something equivalent to a fishing line, and it drags it behind while it's flying. And that's how you get the sharp commands. You're basically you're literally connected to the commander. The controller is literally connected to the device. There's no radio signal that could be blocked by electronic warfare or by hills or by buildings on those hills like we've seen in these previous videos. So it's very effective. And this is, something that we've seen in the war in Ukraine, where entire villages are just covered with what it looks like fishing line, but are the fiber optics. And there's really no defense against these. Army radio told commanders, a commander told Army radio, there's not much to do about it, said a commander currently fighting in Lebanon. The briefing the troops receive boils down to be alert. And if you spot a drone, try and shoot it. So that's where they're at with it. And kind of counterintuitively, the fiber optics allows the drone in some cases to fly at a greater distance. It extends the range, again, because of the hills and the ways that the radio signals can be knocked down. So interesting developments. And there you see it for the first time. We saw it this week for the first time, and you can see the warhead on the top. That is the PG-7VL. It's an Iranian-built anti-tank warhead that can do considerable damage. Let's look at number 18. This is in Kantara again. This is each of these videos are the ones from this week. This was from Friday. Hezbollah says specifically what the ceasefire violation that they are responding to is. So they are upholding the ceasefire, but they're responding to everything that Israel is doing. They're not allowing this ceasefire to be a continuation of the war like Israel wants, to try to achieve what they can't achieve in battle by doing it during a ceasefire, demolishing homes. There you see the hit on the Humvee there, using a house as a base. And you can see that these vehicles, because of the drones, they've moved everything inside. We see all the vehicles parked right up close to the buildings where they are, and backed right up into the buildings to leave as little time as possible for the strikes. And again, just beautiful it's a beautiful area, South Lebanon. It's a crime what's happening to it, literally. Okay, let's look at number 19. This is against a Namr troop carrier. This is in Kantara again. This is near Bint Jbeil. Again, the massive, terraced hillsides, massive destruction through Bint Jbeil is, devastating to see. Bint Jbeil is heart of the resistance. And here, okay, so here are the drones coming down on the Namr troop carrier. You're going to see the soldier's helmet, the tank, the armored personnel carrier crewmate, that's the driver, presumably, or commander, popping out of his hatch there. During that strike, again, no casualty report on this one. This is from just the other day, early this week. A lot of people say that they cut off early, that the footage cut off early, which proves that in this particular shot and the other ones, that their active protection system has intercepted this. And this is just absurd for people who see these comments and want to know if this is true. It's not. If you had the APS on right now with a crewman outside the tank, the crewman would be hit by the fire. It would intercept this RPG round over top of the head of the soldier and explode it in that area. So they're not being intercepted. That is not what's happening here. And that's why Israel is scrambling at the moment. Number 20, we got one more of these. There you can see the fiber optics there linked up to the computer. Again, a different build. This time the warhead is on the top. This is the genius of the Hezbollah drone builds, because you can use different parts, different batteries for particular missions. And that's what we're seeing, various different setups of these quadcopters. There's not a single out-of-box quadcopter. They're putting them together by piece, and the pieces are all in other products, so they're a resilient supply chain, and it's really something that the Israelis can't do anything about. So there you see the direct hit on the Merkava here. This was from April 11th, so sometimes we get them from further back, and that build represents that time, April 11th. So you can see there, we're seeing a good footage of it there with the warhead on top. Okay, let's go to the next one. We've got some down footage here. We've got the audio included in this, so. So that is a Hermes 450 being downed by Hezbollah man-portable air defense system, surface-to-air missile. And this video came out before the Hezbollah video. The guys on the ground are saying it's a drone. It came down. It's coming apart. And they're south of Tyre or Sur on the coast. And this drone is being knocked out. This particular one was the 6th, but there's been 2 more since this one. So I think we're now at 8 Hermes drones. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 also on the BDS list. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 drones here falling from the sky, being destroyed by the resistance. Probably we can see in the next video. You can see the fighter again. So we saw from above. Here we see the fighter holding the man-portable surface-to-air missile in the bush, and you can just see the advantage that the guerrillas in South Lebanon have to carry out these operations after seeing the overhead view of the mountains and the bush and lots of places for cover and concealment. And here is the Hezbollah. Here's Hezbollah adding this video into their video and publishing it again within a couple of hours of the original video being shown. So command and control, and there we see it on the ground. So significant week of operations for Hezbollah. No signs, no end in sight, if we can quote our good friend. And that has been the resistance report for day 937 of Israel's genocide in Gaza.
Thank you, Jon. Wow. Just extraordinary. I mean, can you just kind of outline the construction of these FPV drones? There is literally a spool of fiber optic cables. Is that right? You said it kind of looks like fishing line in the meadows.
Yeah, and it comes out like a fishing line too.
Wow.
From that system.
Yeah.
So basically they buy each of the individual parts, and we broke down and costed out each individual part, and you can get these for, $300, $200, depending on who you're ordering from these parts. But these parts are also in all kinds of other products, and so there's no way, it's not like they're flying a drone out of the box and Israel can try, or the government of Lebanon can try to cut down on these importation of these certain drones. That's not what's happening. They have them broken down by their component parts, and then they can build them, and it's easy to build them. So they don't need expertise. They don't need specialized units. These can be sent all across the front line, the 100-kilometer front line. And they have many, many of them, which just means that they are able to basically switch their tactics from anti-tank missiles, which are dangerous, and the crew of those operating those anti-tank missiles are susceptible to counterstrikes. These drone guys can hide in a place that's safe and fly these out on a spool of fishing line that makes the response time from the controller to the vehicle instant, because it's fiber optics. So
it's a closed circuit, so it's impenetrable to like jamming, GPS jamming technologies by the Israelis and all of that.
It doesn't need the radio. It doesn't need the radio connection. It doesn't need the satellite connection. And so really we're seeing, a few $100 device carrying the warhead. The key is it carries the warhead, and Hezbollah has figured out how to carry the warhead in a few, literally weeks. Something that on the Ukraine battlefield took 6 months, according to drone operators there. But once fiber optics came to the Ukraine battle, it definitely has turned the war on its head as well, because there is really no defense for these.
And I love how the Israeli military is telling their troops, well, if you see one, try to shoot it down. And that's the best they can do.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
And Jon, give us kind of the big picture, because seeing the battle through the eyes of these drones is pretty incredible. And we've seen footage as well, sometimes pretty terrible footage from Ukraine of these drones being able to target individual soldiers on whichever side, and they can reach anyone, anywhere. They can go around corners, they can go inside buildings, they can go through windows, and that's how Israel has been using them. That's how Israel killed 𝐓𝐻𝐿 Sinwar with the drone that came in and basically stared him in the face. So that's all, that is how warfare is done these days. But give us, if you can, a bigger picture, in the sense that Israel 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the Israeli defense minister, has declared that Israel is going to occupy South Lebanon. They're going to take large swaths of territory. That they weren't able to do that before the proliferation of these drones. What's the status of that now? Is Lebanon now basically just off limits to them?
Well, I mean, that the Israeli public's response to the footage that we see from Ukraine of drones chasing individuals, and you see their last moments alive, I don't know. I don't think Israel's society is going to do well with that, given the history. So this was the first week that we actually saw that. Everyone could see how the soldier died. We know his name. Everybody in his, everyone who knows him saw how he died. In a way that is, it just doesn't seem sustainable that Israel will be able to stay in South Lebanon under fire like this to carry out destruction on the level that they apparently intend to, which, we know from Gaza, in a confined area in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing and erasure, it takes time. It takes a lot of explosives. It takes a lot of soldiers. Israel is still doing it in Gaza 3 years on. And so the plan for South Lebanon, big picture, it's difficult to see how Israel will be able to sustain the casualties that are going to be involved in the destruction, in the campaign to destroy family homes. That's what they're doing. They're destroying family homes,
entire villages.
Yeah.
I mean, in like these carpet bomb, fire belts.
And being quite open about it as well in those statements you were reading out earlier, John, just openly saying they're not targeting Hezbollah. They're targeting the civilian population on sectarian grounds.
Yeah, which they did in Gaza too. Is they said that's what they said. We're not fighting qassam in that last round. They said we're fighting infrastructure, was that quote from there. And the one today was pretty much exactly that. They're fighting infrastructure, not. I mean, that's how they get the soldiers to go into Lebanon, by saying, "Don't worry, you're not going to have to fight Hezbollah soldiers." And Netanyahu said that right from the start. He said this is going to be the safest mission they've ever gone on. They're not looking for a fight. They run away from the fight and they bring in air power, and that's why we haven't seen a lot of face-to-face combat, because Israel's not interested in it.
Let me ask you a speculative question, John. I guess, unless you've seen any information out there, I assume that the resistance in Gaza is watching these videos as well. If combat resumes in Gaza, and by combat I mean the resistance fighting the Israeli military, because Israel is continuing to destroy buildings and kill people. That's not combat. If it resumes in Gaza, and I suspect it will at some point, could we see the same kind of drones appearing in Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, Gaza's isolated, blockaded. You can, as we've seen, you can destroy supply lines into Gaza, and that is what Israel does. So I'm not sure in terms of short term. They don't let medical. Some of these parts could be used in medical devices. They don't get in. They don't let any of this kind of stuff get into Gaza at all. So I'm not sure about the.
They might come other ways. No,
they may. I guess we'll see. Yeah, I mean, the drones were part of the major advance, if you want to use that term, of the battle in Gaza. Israel used drones, small drones, right, to case buildings. So they used them inside buildings, and that was a really important part of their battle strategy
inside hospitals too.
Fly them in ahead of time. And we know that some of those were jammed. The resistance was able to knock those drones down. There was reports every day of drones being taken down, and we saw them and perfectly intact. And so I broke some of that down on the resistance report back then. But it was clear that there was electronic warfare from the Palestinians that was bringing down these Israeli drones, and that they could literally take over. They spoof them and they can land them as soft as a pillow. And that's how the drones that we saw were not all in pieces. But I think that I would suggest that this is going to be a factor on every battlefield until there's some kind of solution to it, because there is no solution right now to it. I don't know if people have seen what Russian tanks look like in Ukraine, like turtle tanks. They look like, something from Road Warrior. To build, some of them have trees sticking out of them, branches sticking out of them. They're, 3 times the size. That's just a clue to tell you how little there is to do, how little there is to defend against. And in Ukraine, they've been using much smaller munitions. They've been using more hand grenade type munitions. So it's even worse when you're carrying an RPG warhead. I think this is the future, and it's probably here to stay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jon, again. And if people didn't see your report that you did last week, even though there wasn't a regular live stream, I'm encouraging people to go to our YouTube channel and check that out from last Thursday. Yeah, just thanks again. And I know next week, who knows what the battlefield will bring. I know you're
and what we haven't talked about really Iran, because we're watching it like everyone else. There's a lot of good analysis out there, but what is there to say at this point? War could resume, war could not resume. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and it's likely that the energy shortages will escalate fairly rapidly from here on out. We're hearing every day about more impacts around the world, and what's not clear yet is whether the shooting will start again. I think the indications there are that the Americans are not keen to do that, because they got a pretty bloody nose last time. The last 2 times. Israel always seems to be eager for war. So we're just watching and waiting. We don't know what the world will look like in a week's time, but we'll be here for it.
Yep, as always. All right. Ali, let's take a look at the website. We've published some incredible features and some in-house news reports. I know that our colleague Dave Cronin just published something. He's always nipping at the heels of the EU genocidaires.
He really is. He's really uncovering the links between the far right, the Israeli far right and pro-Israel groups in Europe, and the European Commission and the European Union more generally. And these ties seem to be deepening. The EU has just gone off the rails in that respect. And so he focuses on one of the top EU officials who is embracing Israel. So that's another story. And then in terms of sort of ferreting out these Israel lobby connections, we have another really great article from Jodie McIntyre about Peter Mandelson, who was the former top, for the past few decades, top British official, had to resign as British ambassador in Washington a few months ago because of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, which have been widely reported. But this piece goes into something that is not always talked about, which is Peter Mandelson's ties to Israel. Asa, is there anything else to say about this story?
Yeah, Mandelson described Epstein as his best pal. I mean, that's something that's known, but it's so striking, and this is for many years as well. So there's a deep connection there. And this guy is somebody who was at the forefront. He was called approvingly amongst the British press as the Prince of Darkness, like he was some sort of fixer for successive Labour governments. That he was this sort of genius political strategist and media manipulator. And another thing that's really significant as well is that his protege, Morgan McSweeney, is really the person until, he was let go recently due to primarily due to this scandal. of Mandelson's connections to Epstein, because McSweeney was the person who insisted on that. He was really the guy, the power behind the throne, behind Keir Starmer's throne. And he too has got very long-standing ties to Israel. So, you know, a really great story by Jody here. And he's done one about McSweeney, which you can just see on the screen now on the top right, Morgan McSweeney, the man running Britain and his ties to Israel. So, yeah, some great investigative reporting by Jody McIntyre.
Excellent.
And just a couple of other things. We were talking earlier in the show about the activism people are doing all around the country and internationally. Nora, of course, you're in Ireland, and I was in the past couple of weeks in Michigan, in Massachusetts, and in Maine, all states starting with M for some reason. And meeting activists there. But this piece is from another place starting with M, Montreal. And shout out to our many friends in Canada. And I really like this piece by Aya Hafida, who's a student at the University of Montreal, because she talks about the long-term approach the students are taking there in terms of challenging university complicity in, and this is not just at the University of Montreal, but at other institutions in Canada, and sort of the methodical long-term approach they're taking, which historically has been the route to success with this type of activism. So I think it's really great to highlight those things and hopefully not just inform, but inspire other people to get involved in campaigns and learn more about campaigns in their communities.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And of course, you can go to electronicintifada.net to read all of our new features and news reports, and also to sign up for our mailing list. So you'll get like an easy to read once a day digest of things that we've published while you were sleeping. And of course, hit the donate now link to keep this publication, this live stream, this podcast, this fierce independent media going and vital. And you know, we're able to pay our contributors in Gaza and in Lebanon because of your support. So please hit the donate now link. And Ali, who do we have to thank this week?
Thanks, Nora. So many people, and you continue to send us so much love in all the ways through the comments. Now that we're reading the comments you post on the other videos, emails people send us, the tweets, and of course by liking and sharing so we can get these videos in front of more people. And of course by sharing the articles we've just been looking at on the website. And so all of that support is really fantastic. And those who go above and beyond and make a financial contribution, which keeps all of this going, thank you so much. And I'm just going to name a few people: Shanley, Kevin, Susan, Christine, Dennis, Fred, Gail, Eddie, lots of love to you, Paul, Becca, Brian, Yosef, Salim, Ammar, and Stephen. Thanks to each and every one of you, and to everyone else who contributes, makes a one-time gift, or who signs up for a monthly donation to keep us going strong all the time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And of course, I want to thank Tamara Nassar, our director and producer of this program. Thank you, Tamara, of course. Thank you, Ellie Gerzon, for social media production, to Pierre Loisel for radio production, everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our colleagues and comrades, contributors. And on behalf of myself and Tamara, Ali, John, and Asa, thank you all, and we will see you next week.